Hello and welcome to the Women in Streaming Media Education Podcast. I'm very excited to be recording this season at IBC in this lovely setup here, which is sponsored by Rise Academy and their equipment and some of their students. My first guest, very excited to welcome Dee Davison, who's going to be talking to us about sustainability in streaming. Dee, could you just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, so my name's Dee Davison. I have been working in film and TV in one form or other for about 25 years, and latterly in sustainability, which is my absolute passion. And I've been freelance consulting for a couple of years, but I'm super excited to be joining a brilliant sustainability consultancy in October called What's Sustainability, who do all sorts of net zero planning, carbon accounting, ESG strategy, and training as well. So I work kind of across the board, supporting companies to decarbonise and to reduce their environmental impacts.
Very exciting. Congratulations
Thank
on the
you.
new role. So when we're talking about streaming specifically, what are the kind of sustainability factors of getting content to audiences?
It's the perfect first question, right? Where do we start? What's involved? So from an environmental perspective, if we're talking about getting content from sort of post-production phase onto people's screens, there's a lot to take account of. So for each company, depending on where you sit in that value chain, the boundaries of what you have to think about will differ. But if we're just talking big picture, the way I think about it is really in four categories of things. So firstly, we've got equipment. So all of the tech that we're surrounded by here in IBC to record and to edit and to distribute content, all the equipment from a kind of raw materials point of view, from a mining of minerals or gold or precious metals that go into circuit boards, to the making of different types of man-made plastics, the manufacturing process, and then the distribution process of getting that equipment to its end point. So equipment is one piece, is one environmental impact. Secondly is infrastructure. So all of the fixed or wired and wireless networks, transmission masts, submarine cables, fibre optic cables, in-home networks, CDNs, data centres, everything that enables a piece of content to get from A to B. The construction of that, the materials again, the maintenance and the repair. There's a whole lot of stuff that goes into transferring data around the world, as we know. So that's the second impact. The third would be energy use, which is the bit that we really focus on most, because it's the bit that we can control most as providers of content. So it's the energy consumption of content creation at the sort of post-production level, but it's also the energy that we use in the distribution networks, and really importantly, it's the energy of end user devices, so the TVs or the screens or the mobiles that audiences around the world use to consume their content. And that's one of the most significant portions in terms of energy consumption of the whole distribution process, is the actual consumption at the end. So energy use is the third. And finally, end-of-life treatment, which sounds a bit depressing, but it's a term we use in sustainability, and it means basically what do you do with your equipment and your products when they've come to the end of their usable life for you. So that might not mean that they're unusable to someone else. So this is all the sort of circularity principle, right? So keeping materials in a circular motion for as long as possible through repair, recycling, reuse, donations. There's a whole lot of work that we can do to try and reduce the amount of raw materials and non-renewable resources that we're extracting from the earth to make more and more kit the whole time by reusing what we've got. So those are the four areas: kit, infrastructure, energy use, and end of life.
But there's a lot to that,
There's
isn't
a lot,
there?
yeah. Without it being too overwhelming, there is a lot to think about, yeah.
And with the fact that, you know, there's more and more people consuming content now in more and more places around the world, you know, surely this is just getting worse or a bigger problem. Is that right?
I mean, logically, that's the way you would think about it. So, and in one sense, if you think about it on a global scale, that's true in one sense of distributing and consuming content. The more nations that accelerate with digitization, the more people that will have devices, the more infrastructure there will be needed to service that content getting to audiences. So yes, on the one hand. But the good news with technology is generally the more mature technology gets, the more efficient it becomes. So if you think about the computer that I used to do my dissertation on 25 years ago was a bit of a lump underneath my desk at uni, and it was a huge big Dell white screen, probably consuming a lot more energy than my little laptop does nowadays. So things do get more energy efficient, particularly with technology. So there has been a decoupling of environmental emissions and energy use in ICT with the increased demand of ICT. Those two things are not proportionately growing together, thankfully. And the other thing particularly around content distribution, is from a network point of view, there is a base load amount of energy required to run the network, regardless of how much traffic's going down it. So utilisation is really important from an energy efficiency perspective. So I often talk to people about it like a tube train. So in London, on a good day, the tube trains run in London every 3 to 5 minutes, whether there's one passenger on the carriage or 500 passengers. So arguably that tube and the energy used to transport people around is more efficient than more people that are getting on that train. Obviously, until the point where it doesn't mean we don't need to worry about it, because there's a tipping point where we reach capacity on a network or on a tube train, and then we have to build more to service that demand. So, and then that has lots of environmental impact. So it's not to say we shouldn't worry about network capacity, but in terms of what's material and what's within our control, there may be other things that comes higher on the list.
And kind of with that in mind, what would you say are the important things that we need to focus on? Love that example, by the way. And also, they don't run like that here. They're every 10 minutes.
Yeah. And with in London with the strikes at the moment as well.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Let's not even go there. So areas of focus is really what we say in sustainability often is, first of all, look at what you can control. It can be overwhelming to think about, what's happening in like the third or fourth tier supply chain partner that you may be getting your equipment from. But first of all, work on what you can control, and that's things like your facilities, so the simple stuff, turning the lights off and making sure that your HVAC systems are well maintained, looking at your capex spend, so looking at what you're buying, not buying anything that you don't need, it's obvious to say, but looking at your circularity, so what you're doing with your waste from an e-waste perspective as well as a general waste perspective. So there's all the things within your control. Business travel's a big one. We've all flown or travelled here by train, hopefully, to IBC. So business travel's big, commuting as well. So there are a number of things within a greenhouse gas emissions footprint that you can control. Then beyond and alongside that, we look at what's material. So for example, recycling is important, but it could be that your carbon footprint tells you that your biggest emissions are in your freight distribution partners. And then, air freight is so much more emissive than sea freight, for example. Is there a way that you can change your scheduling to get kit from A to B in a different way, through a different means, or for example from using more hiring services and that sort of thing to kind of reduce the amount of kit that has to travel around the place. So so what's within your control and what's material really are things to focus on from a individual company's point of view.
Surely gathering that information must be to do with being able to measure it in the first place. What does measuring look like for us, the media?
It can be a challenge, particularly with digital emissions, looking at data centers and trying to get granular detail from cloud providers can be really difficult for the cloud providers themselves, but for the customers, with distributed networks, cloud edge networks, it's hard to be able to track where your gigabytes are sitting at any one point and what wattage they're consuming on whatever server. So a greenhouse gas emissions footprint is the first place to start. So to do that calculation, there are estimates. The closer we can get to activity data, the better. What I mean by that is not what you spend on your cloud provider, but how many terabytes you're storing with them and you're processing with them, and where that's happening location-wise. So the more activity data we can collect, the better a baseline carbon footprint we can set. And most people need third-party support to do a carbon footprint. To be honest, it's quite a kind of technical, scientific calculation to do, and you need to make sure it's robust and following the relevant science and all the protocols out there. So starting with the carbon footprint, but there are also a number of industry bodies working on methodologies, standardized methodologies for measuring things. So getting involved with that discussion to understand more. So for example, we've got the greening of streaming, we've got the Media Technology Sustainability Series, we've got EcoFlow Project, we've got the EBU, we've got the DPP. I could come out with so many more acronyms. I'm sure people know these organisations. So yeah, there are lots of people out there who are looking at this. And I would say get some expert support if you need it, because it can be overwhelming. So there are a lot of agencies, including the one I'm going to work with, but there are lots of others out there as well who are there to support people to get a measurement and to give them recommendations about how to manage their footprints.
So it sounds like there's a lot of support out there. What's your kind of call to action for industry? What do we need to do as an industry to actually push this forward and make this happen? It does feel like we've been talking about this, or I've been hassling you to talk about it on things for a long time. Like, what do we need to do to go forward?
Well, I mean, I'm quite optimistic. There are a lot of groups, as I said, that are already talking about this in certain areas. The Sports Video Group had a sustainability summit yesterday at IBC. Albert and the DPP are still talking about it and convening groups of experts together. I do think we still need more transparency on data. We still need to collaborate more. There's probably not enough people around the table to have the conversation. And I understand that, there are commercial reasons why some information can't be shared between businesses, but that's what industry bodies are there for, to kind of, aggregate this information and then redistribute it in a form that's useful, but doesn't interfere with any sort of competitiveness. So I feel working together with the industry bodies, I'd love to see more transparency on data center emissions. That's a really big deal, particularly with AI, and the cloud providers are having those conversations, but I know it's a real huge challenge for them to actually get to the into the sort of nitty-gritty of what wattage is used for different data packages. But there's programs like Humans Not Robots, which is a software provider who's doing great work in giving people more understanding of cloud-based footprints as well. So there's work going out there. I would like to see more collaboration, more transparency, people actively publishing their footprints and sharing the challenges, share the successes, but also tell us where things aren't working, because everyone's probably in the same boat.
We purposefully didn't mention AI, but I was just going to end on
how could we not?
Is there any need to mention it at this point?
It's interesting, and I've read a number of articles on this and talked to lots of people about it. I feel like there's so much opportunity with AI in the sustainability world, and it's already being used in some amazing ways. It's detecting oil spills that previously weren't being able to be detected. It's being used by the UN to look at methane leaks. It's being used to sort of assess reforestation initiatives to make sure trees are actually going in the ground. So, it's got ability to analyse data, beyond any kind of human being, and will really speed up a lot of our processes. So it's great in those ways. It does use a lot of energy, it does use a lot of water, but the data centre providers are getting smarter with being more energy efficient, working with renewable energy, finding new innovative ways of cooling that reduce water use. So I feel like there will be, we do need to worry about it. We don't need it to replace Google searches, because if we do, then the energy use goes off the scale. The IEA predicted that if everybody replaced their Google search with ChatGPT, the energy consumption would be the same as 1.5 million European households, or something insane. So please don't stop using Google, and we don't need to stop using our brains as well. I worry about that a little bit. But I think it needs to be measured, right? It needs to be kind of monitored and sensible use guidelines, and goodness knows how that comes about. But I think if everyone uses it responsibly, then we should find a way.
Thank you, Dee. I'd like to end on that positive note. More engagement from everybody, and we will move forward. So thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me, Polly.